That night, I thought I was going to freeze to death in the middle of a square in Berlin. The wind cut through my coat like a knife. My feet were soaked, and my hands had gone completely numb. A group of young people watched me from across the street, laughing, like I was some exotic animal abandoned in the snow. I was shaking, but it wasn't just from the cold. It was something inside me, something heavier, the weight of everything I carried. The knowing that in this country where everything seems clean, polite, and modern, a man like me was still treated as if he didn't belong. But right there, in that moment, I made a decision. I would no longer follow their rules. The rules that tell me where I can live, how I should dress, when I'm allowed to work or even to breathe. I didn't come to Germany to ask for favors. I came to claim my space, even if I had to do it with a tired body and a weathered soul. You might think that sounds like pride, that I'm just another rebellious immigrant. Think what you want. But I did adapt. Yes, I did. In my way, on my terms, at my own pace. Because those who survive what I've survived don't go back, and they don't bow easily. In that frozen square, surrounded by silence and contempt, I understood. Either I made my own rules, or I'd be erased by theirs. My name is Fadil. I'm 43 years old, and I was born in Kandahar in southern Afghanistan. If you've ever heard that name on the news, it was probably linked to explosions, armed groups, or foreign troops marching through dry, dusty villages. But that wasn't the image I grew up with. Kandahar, despite everything, was a place filled with the strong scent of spices in the air, where the voices in the markets mixed with the crackling of old radios and the prayers echoing from the mosques. I grew up helping my father in a small fabric shop, surrounded by women choosing colorful cloths for their trousseaux, kids running through the alleys, and neighbors who knew everyone's name. There was hardship, of course, but there was also routine, culture, warmth. Life wasn't easy, but it had structure, and more than anything, it had meaning. The feeling of belonging fades slowly, until one day you wake up and no longer recognize the street you were born on. First came the suspicious looks. Then, the weapons openly displayed in broad daylight. Then came the curfews, the pointless interrogations. And finally, the certainty that one wrong move could land you in a hole no one ever returns from. When they started controlling even people's breathing, when I saw people being taken just for studying too much or speaking too loudly in the market, I knew my time had come. Either I left, or I would be buried right there, silent and unseen. Coming to Germany was never part of my original plan. I had thought of a neighboring country, maybe somewhere where the language sounded a little closer to mine. But the routes kept changing, and fate seemed to choose for me. I ended up hearing about Berlin the way someone hears about another planet. A place where people walk around with headphones on, where every minute is counted, where even the trees seem to grow in straight lines. I'll admit, it scared me at first. This idea of living somewhere so controlled, so precisely calculated. It was nothing like the world I knew. When I arrived, I realized the cold in this city wasn't just in the weather. It was in the way people looked at me, spoke to me, or didn't. The system felt designed to exclude anyone who hadn't been born inside it. They expected me to follow rules I couldn't understand, to accept dead-end jobs, to smile while being treated as if I always owed something. But I've never been one to bow to convention. I came here with my faith, my story, and my own way of facing the world. And from the very first day I set foot here, I knew, to survive, I'd have to walk off the tracks. Germany wanted to tame me, but I'd already come too far to become someone's leashed animal. Kandahar has a different kind of light, a brightness that seems to rise from the sand itself. In the mornings, the sky always turned that burning shade of orange that stung the eyes and gave you the strange feeling that everything would be okay, even when it was already going wrong. I used to wake up early, open the shop with my father, and spend the first hours of the day helping him organize the fabrics. It was a ritual. The smell of cotton mixed with dust, the sound of boxes being opened, the strong coffee brewing across the street. It all blended into one sound, one smell, one breath. My father always said that keeping a shop open in difficult times was an act of resistance. He didn't use that word, of course, but that's what he meant. While chaos grew outside, inside the shop there was still bargaining, conversation, life. I clung to that place like someone clinging to a plank in the middle of the ocean. Customers still came, afraid, suspicious, but they came. Every week, another familiar face disappeared, and no one asked why. It was better not to know. In that place, silence was worth more than gold. With time, the routine grew shorter. The shop opened for fewer hours. The city began to wither. The screams started from a distance, then grew closer, until they became part of the background. We stopped flinching at the sound of explosions. We learned to judge how far they were by the way the ground shook. And when we could no longer finish a sentence without looking over our shoulder, I knew something had changed for good. I tried to hold on. I thought I could manage. Even when the customers vanished. Even when the shelves began to empty. Even when my father no longer had the strength to unlock the door. Kandahar was my root. It wasn't easy to imagine life anywhere else. I knew every corner, every shadow, every face. The idea of leaving it all behind hurt more than any threat. But there came a time when the threats stopped being words and started knocking on the door. One night, I got a warning that stole my sleep. There's no need to say where it came from or how. What matters is that I understood. I had been marked. From that point on, everything I was, a shopkeeper, a father of two, a man of faith, meant nothing. To them, I was a problem. And in that reality, problems don't last long. I looked at my wife and children and saw fear already living inside them. They pretended they were fine, but the fear was in the trembling hands, in the eyes that avoided contact, in the shallow breathing. I knew I couldn't just sit and wait for the worst. I had to make the kind of decision that breaks any real man. To leave home not out of hope, but out of the sheer need to keep existing. In Afghanistan, the world has always been ruled by invisible forces. You could be a good man, hard-working, respected by all. But all it took was for someone to put your name on the wrong list, and everything turned to dust. I was discarded like an old scrap of paper, and once again, I had to accept. Dignity means nothing when you have no control over your own land. On my last day in Kandahar, I closed the shop early and walked slowly down the street where I had grown up. Every house bore its own scar. A shattered window, a hole in the wall, a door braced with wooden planks. It looked like a war zone, and yet people were still trying to live inside it. I passed the school where I studied, now buried under rubble. The field where we played football as teenagers had been overtaken by trash and weeds. The voices that once filled that neighborhood were gone. Only the wind remained, pushing plastic bags through the cracked walls. I went to the mosque and prayed like it was my last time. I asked for nothing but strength. Strength to endure what was coming, to not lose my mind along the way. To remember who I was, even when everything around me tried to turn me into a number, a statistic, an invader. As I walked back home, I knew it was my last sunset there. Not because I chose to leave, but because I had no choice. It was the end of an era, of my shop, of my daily rhythm, of my right to walk the streets without fear. The city that raised me was no longer mine, and I knew that from that moment on, my story would have to be told somewhere else, even if no one there wanted to listen. When I left Kandahar, I wrote my name on the shop wall with a piece of charcoal. It was a foolish little gesture, my way of leaving a trace, even knowing it might be erased the very next day. I left with a small backpack, without saying goodbye to anyone but my closest family. Because at that point, the fewer people who knew, the better for everyone. I was taken by a man I didn't know. He barely spoke and walked fast. They told me he would get me to Herat, and from there, I'd be handed over to someone else. And so began a long chain of transfers, as if I were a package crossing borders without an owner, without a destination, just following the current. The first days hit me hard. Traveling in hiding before dawn, along paths that looked like they'd been carved by ghosts. It's a kind of humiliation only those who've lived it can understand. There was no space for comfort, not even for rest. Hunger came slowly, like the body itself was rationing energy just to survive. And fear. Fear clung to my back every moment. I tried to keep my mind steady, to remember why I was there. But the exhaustion made me question whether any of it made sense at all. When we reached the border with Iran, things got worse. We were crammed into a cargo truck with dozens of other men, silent, expressionless, all carrying that same look in their eyes, the look of someone who's seen too much. The smell was unbearable, a mix of sweat, urine, and dust. We had to crouch, hidden between boxes and tarps, for hours that felt like days. Every turn made my stomach twist. Every sudden stop made my heart freeze. I knew that if we were caught, there would be no questions. They would just send us back to the void we came from, or worse. When we finally crossed over, I couldn't even feel relief. Iran wasn't safe. It was just a layover. From there, we continued on foot for days, through deserts, forgotten villages, fields that smelled of gasoline. Some nights we slept under open sky, covered only by the stars and surrounded by insects. Other times, we were stuffed into the basements of abandoned houses, waiting for the next step. The smugglers changed faces every week, but they all had the same cold way of treating us, like goods. They didn't speak, just pointed. They ate in front of us without sharing. They told us to run without explaining why. And we obeyed, because any hesitation could cost a life. In Turkey, the atmosphere felt different, more urban, closer to civilization. But the risk was even higher. There were tighter controls, more active police, and one wrong move could mean months in prison. I was passed from one hiding place to another. Basements that reeked of mold and had floors as hard as stone, where the only thing that kept me awake was the sound of others breathing. Sometimes I thought someone might die during the night. The exhaustion was so deep, the silence felt eternal. But in the morning, we were all still there, weaker, dirtier, but alive. Getting to Greece was one of the hardest parts. We crossed the sea in an inflatable boat, fragile and overloaded. I was one of the last to board, and ended up on the edge, my legs submerged in freezing water. The crossing took hours. At first, the sea was calm, but all it took was one strong current to set the boat swaying. I saw men praying in silence, others crying, others just staring into the dark. Out there, in that black water, anything felt possible. Danger came quietly. All it took was one mistake. We reached the coast at dawn, exhausted, trembling, our arms aching from holding on. None of us spoke. Silence was the first thing that touched Greek soil. But there was no time to rest. We were immediately pushed to keep moving, to head deeper into the continent. We slept in forests, ate whatever we could find, walked for days. First to Macedonia, then to Serbia. Europe, the one they say is developed and welcoming, started to show its other face. Rejection, closed gates, orders barked in languages I didn't understand. It was like being shoved from one place to another, never truly accepted. In Hungary, they made us crawl under fences, wade through fields with mud up to our knees, sleep in sewers. I felt like an animal on the run, and still, I kept walking, because I knew that to stop was to give up, and giving up was never an option for me. I hadn't come this far to accept crumbs. Every step I took was carved out of pain. Every kilometer had its price. It went on for months, eating little, sleeping even less, being treated like I didn't exist. I saw Europe's clean cities pass by through the windows of trains or from the edges of highways, but I couldn't touch them. It was like living in a parallel world, one made for people with the wrong passport. By the time I finally reached Germany, I couldn't feel my body anymore. My feet were torn up, my eyes sunken, my face hidden behind a ragged beard I hadn't seen in weeks. And yet, when I saw the sign for Berlin, I felt something strange. It wasn't joy. It was relief. The feeling of having survived an unfair game. I arrived at an improvised refugee camp reeking of sweat and sour food. It wasn't a dignified place, but I wasn't there looking for dignity. I was looking for territory. a corner where I could rebuild my name even if it meant starting from scratch. From that moment on, I decided that no one would tell me what I could or couldn't do. They call us illegal, but those who survive don't wait for permission. I crossed 3 war-torn countries, 5 sealed borders, and lived through things that could have ended me for good. It wasn't luck, it was resistance. Berlin welcomed me with invisible walls, unspoken rules, and cold eyes. But I had already been through too much to be frightened by bureaucracy. While they handed me forms and endless waiting lists, I carved my own path. When they told me I had to wait for papers to work, I found ways to earn with my own 2 hands. When they looked at me like an intruder, I made sure they saw me. I didn't cross the world just to be erased. You might think that attitude is too much, that I came here to defy, to break the system, but that's not it. I came because I had no other choice. And when there's no choice, the only rule that matters is survival. That's the one that brought me here, and it's the one that keeps me standing. When people talk about Germany, many think of progress. Trains that never run late, spotless cities, efficient healthcare, everything neat, everything working like clockwork. And it's true. That side of Germany exists. But no one tells you what happens when you're the foreign body in that system. When your face, your clothes, even the way you walk make it obvious you weren't born here. In Berlin, I learned that prejudice doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides behind rules and averted eyes. At first, they put my name on a list. Then another. Waiting for shelter. Waiting for documents. Waiting for answers. I spent months in a tiny room, sharing the space with other men whose stories were different, but whose faces carried the same look of exhaustion. We had food, always the same. We had beds, but never rest. We had an address, but never belonging. And even so, I knew I had to swallow hard and keep going. It wasn't time to fight. Not yet. I found work off the books, cleaning out warehouses at the edge of the city. I'd start before sunrise and come back when the cold was already cutting my face, the kind of job no German wanted, but someone still needed to do. When I found out how much they earned to do the same work with a signed contract, I swallowed my pride and kept going. Not because I'm weak, but because I've learned how to wait for the right moment to turn the game around. Over time, I saved enough to move out of the shelter. I rented a small room behind a store in exchange for helping the owner with deliveries. From there, I started gaining ground. One job led to another, and soon I was fixing pipes, carrying boxes, helping people move. No papers, no contracts, but with heavier pockets. While they argued about laws, I kept the money moving. Of course, the police stopped me a few times. They asked where I was from, where I was going, what I was doing, why I was walking alone at night. I always answered calmly, with a soft voice, but steady eyes. I've seen too much to be afraid of uniforms and badges. And when they call me illegal, I just think about everything I've built here. Because in the end, the ones who build are not illegal. They're essential. Berlin is a beautiful city, but a cold one. Cold in its weather, and in the way it treats people. The neighbors barely speak. People step aside on the sidewalks, and no matter how hard I try, they still look at me like I'm occupying space that doesn't belong to me. The most ironic part? That space, the one they think isn't mine. I'm the one who kept it standing. I'm the one who cleaned the sidewalks after the snow. I'm the one who fixed the plumbing in the school no one wanted to touch. I'm the one who hauled rubble from the old buildings. And still, I'm treated like an unwanted visitor. But you know what bothers me the most? They expect me to stay silent, to be grateful, to accept the role of a permanent guest. But I'm not a guest. I arrived. I entered. I worked. I contributed. And if I walk the streets of Berlin with my head held high today, it's because I know my worth. It wasn't charity that brought me here. It was resistance. Many want us to become versions of themselves, to speak like them, dress like them, think like them. But I didn't leave my culture behind. I wear my traditional clothes with pride when I want to. I say my prayers on my own time. I teach my children their language, but also mine. Because adapting doesn't mean erasing who you are. It means growing with the marks of what shaped you. I've heard people here say, if you don't like the rules, then leave. As if they had any idea what I had to do to get here. As if their rules were written with someone like me in mind. But I've already learned. If I had followed all the rules from the beginning, I wouldn't have made it out of Afghanistan alive. It was by breaking the rules that I survived. And if that's what got me this far, then it won't change now. Today, I have my own small business. Nothing big, nothing too formal, but it's mine. I maintain apartments for people I know. I help other immigrants get on their feet. I teach what I learned the hard way. I don't depend on anyone. And everything I've built, I built my way. No manual, no permission. If I'm an invader, why do you rely on me to keep your basements dry, your heaters running, your elevators in order? If I'm a burden, why does the system need people like me just to keep spinning? The truth is, Germany lives a dilemma. It needs us, but it doesn't want to admit it. It wants our labor, but rejects our presence. It wants our usefulness, but refuses our face. But I don't care anymore about what they're willing to accept. What matters is that I'm here, alive, active, present, and more than anything, free to make my own rules. A lot of people around here still don't get it. We didn't cross deserts, seas, and walls just to live on favors. I didn't cross continents to kneel before any system or to ask for permission to exist. Those who survived what I've survived aren't looking for scraps. They're looking for space. And space isn't requested. It's claimed. They love to take pride in their order, their cleanliness, their efficiency, but they hide the truth that all of it depends on hands like mine. Hands that clean up what they mess up, hands that build what they design, hands that hold up the very foundations they pretend are solid. And even so, they expect us to smile, to dress like them, to speak softly, and to say thank you for the chance to be exploited. But I didn't step into this game to play by their rules. I came to flip the board. It wasn't Europe that saved me. I got here any way I could. Even when the road tried to throw me off at every turn, I endured the cold, the contempt, the loneliness, the system built to push me back. And every step I took, I knew, if I walked their way, I'd never get anywhere. Today, I may not have all the papers, but I have presence. I don't carry a badge, but I carry a name. I don't follow a manual, but I move forward. And I know that unsettles a lot of people. But I didn't come here to be invisible. I came to claim space. Because those who came from dry land, who slept on bare ground, who crossed borders with faith burning in their chest, they've already learned only those who make their own rules survive. So tell me, did I go against the system or did I just expose the truth? Leave it in the comments.